There are 100 people on death row in the state of Pennsylvania. This is part 5 of the series. Anan Robinson, 27 years on death row. Tara Hodge and Robinson had an inconsistent relationship from early 1993 till Hodge found out in February 1995 that Robinson was seeing someone else. After more than a year, they didn't see one another until March 30th, 1996, when Robinson and Hodge resumed a close friendship. Hodge spent one night on March 30th and April 30th, 4 days between May 10th and 13th, and one night on June 1st, 1996, with Robinson between the night of the incident in issue and March 30th, 1996. When Hodge replied to a personal ad in the local paper, she was introduced to Scott Bal on May 26, 1996. Hodge sent Robinson a letter terminating their relationship on June 10, 1996. Hodge worked the 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. shift at Walmart on June 29. Following her shift, Hodge met Bass at her apartment located in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, where they had a pizza delivered. Just after midnight, Robinson showed up at Tara Hodge's place as Bass was taking a shower. Hodge opened her apartment to him, and Robinson and Hodge got into a fight. Robinson drew a revolver, pointed it at Hodge, and shot her when she refused to ask Bass to leave. Hodge heard 3 gunshots. She collapsed to the ground, rendered senseless, as Robinson sprinted past her. Hodge regained consciousness in a pool of her own blood at around 1 in the morning. When she went into the bathroom, she discovered Bass dead in the shower. She managed to pull herself over to her neighbor's house next door. When the police got to the neighbor's house, they discovered Hodge was bleeding from the head. Unable to speak, she wrote a note telling the police to go to her flat. When the ambulance came, it took Hodge straight to the hospital. When the police arrived at Hodge's flat, they discovered Bass's body in the shower. The officer went to the hospital to talk with Tara Hodge after leaving the apartment, and she identified Robinson as the shooter. John Amos Small, 27 years on death row. Following his conviction for the murder and attempted essay of 17-year-old Cheryl Smith, Small was given a sentence on June 19, 1996. 5 weeks after Cheryl Smith vanished on September 15, 1981, a hunter discovered her severely decomposed remains a few yards from the Maryland state line and east of Cridler Schoolhouse Road. The adolescent from Midway, Adams County, was missing multiple front teeth and was completely nude. Her skull was crushed. According to the prosecution, Smith was killed by 2 hits to the head caused by a rock or other hard object. They added that they thought her attackers attempted to essay her. However, due to the body's disintegration, forensic specialists were unable to establish if that was really the case. Smith was killed in the woods while attending a drinking party with several teenagers and young adults. Several partygoers, including the victim's pals, were aware of what had happened, but none of them reported it to the police, according to the authorities. Arthur Jerome Boumar, 25 years on death row. Amy Willard was a standout lacrosse player at George Mason University, majoring in physical education and aspiring high school sports coach at the time of her death. She was the youngest of 3 children born to retired Chester Police Captain Paul Willard and nurse Gail Willard. On June 19, 1996, Amy Willard was returning home from Brookhaven after spending the night out with friends when Boumar pursued and kidnapped her near the Springfield exit of Interstate 476 onto the Media bypass. In North Philadelphia, Boumar disposed of her body in a litter-filled yard at 16th Street and Indiana Avenue. The murder of Amy remained unsolved until June 5, 1997, when Boumar was taken into custody on an active warrant for violating his parole following a previous conviction for second-degree murder in Las Vegas. Frances Bauer Harris, 26 years on death row. Daryl Martin broke up a fight between Harris and Maxine Snook, his ex-girlfriend, on August 1, 1995, at the Pipeline Bar in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Harris was charged with aggravated assault after giving Martin a violent beating. The trial was set for November of 1996. Before that, Martin was one of the witnesses Harris had obtained the addresses from in the police reports of the other witnesses against him. Harris asked Kimberly Kistler, his ex-girlfriend, to make sure Martin indeed resided at the address he had gotten. He paid Kistler a visit on the weekend on November 2, 1996, at her residence in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania. Kistler had called Martin on November 3rd at his request, luring him into what turned out to be a tragic encounter. Kistler introduced herself to Martin as Patty, a woman from Ohio, and said that she had previously met him when he was drunk. She made plans to meet Martin for drinks that evening between 7:30 and 8 at the Tobias Frog restaurant in Lancaster. After scanning the area and arriving at the restaurant well ahead of the scheduled hour, Harris and Kistler waited for Martin in their car. They waited for Martin in a nearby parking lot. Harris cut the left front tire of Martin's car after Martin had arrived and entered the restaurant. Martin eventually exited the restaurant at around 8:45 p.m., got into his car, and tried to drive off. When he realized that his car had a flat tire, he turned into an abandoned Dunkin' Donuts parking lot. After that, he strolled back to the restaurant and used the payphone there to ask his brother for help. But Harris assaulted Martin with a knife when he came back to the Dunkin' Donuts lot. He killed Martin by slashing his throat so forcefully that the cut was more than 8 inches long and 3 inches deep. William Rivera, 26 years on death row. Mr. and Mrs. Kumok Kang closed their jewelry store on North Front Street in Philadelphia in the evening of September 25, 1995. After leaving the store, the Kangs crossed the street to their station wagon, which was parked there. Mrs. Kang had an ice box that she used to hold her lunch, her pocketbook, and a tiny paper bag with a beauty kit inside. Mr. Kang was holding an X-ray in a manila envelope. The Kangs approached the station wagon as Williams Rivera and his two collaborators, Robert Ortiz Bonilla and Luis Centeno, watched. The three men made up their minds to rob the couple because they thought the Kangs were carrying money in the manila envelope. The Kangs took Front Street towards Rising Sun Avenue, their customary route home. Mrs. Kang was seated on the passenger side of the car, driven by Mr. Kang. At Front Street and Rising Sun Avenue, Mr. Kang came to a stop at a red light. Mrs. Kang was startled to hear glass breaking and a man's yell for her husband to get out of the car. Mrs. Kang saw a revolver piercing the broken glass and pointing directly at her husband's chest. She then heard 2 gunshots. Mr. Kang was shot twice more after being held out in front of the vehicle. William Rivera was later identified as the shooter by eyewitnesses. After that, he got into the station wagon's driver's side while one of the accomplices, later revealed to be co-defendant Robert Ortiz Bonilla, opened the passenger side door and yelled at Mrs. Kang to get out of the vehicle. She was thrown out of the car while the station wagon was already moving, and Ortiz Bonilla took her wallet and sprang into the moving car. After that, the car continued north on Rising Sun Avenue. Mr. Kang was declared deceased at Einstein Hospital later that evening. He was shot 4 times in total, 3 times in the chest and once in the hand. Albert Reed, 25 years on death row. The state of Pennsylvania sentenced Reed to death for the murder of a lady and her daughter. Albert Reed shot and killed his estranged wife Carla Reed and her daughter after breaking into their home, according to court filings. William Wright, 23 years on death row. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania sentenced Wright to death for the murder of his neighbor. The victim and his wife had a brief separation, according to court records, during which the victim's wife met William Wright. Nevertheless, the affair was short-lived as the married couple got back together. William Wright broke into the house, followed the victim into a closet, and shot him many times. Jose Buzenet, 25 years on death row. Richard Boxley, 23 years on death row. The state of Pennsylvania condemned Boxley and Buzenet to death for the murder of Jarvey Bolton. Court records state that they both plotted the victim's murder in connection with a narcotics deal. In broad daylight, the victim was fatally shot. Troy Drumhiller, 23 years on death row. The state of Pennsylvania sentenced Drumhiller to death for the murder of Carol Hutenstein. Court records reveal that Troy Drumhiller had a history of violence against her. She was his occasional girlfriend, who Drumhiller viciously stabbed to death in 1999 after she obtained a protective order against him. Michael Brandon Singley, 22 years on death row. In August 2000, Singley entered a guilty plea to first-degree murder and additional charges related to the stabbing death of his cousin, Travis Rohrer's wife, Christine Rohrer. On election night in November 1998, Singley told Rohrer he had car issues and needed to use her phone before assaying her and binding her with duct tape in her house. After stabbing her 20 times, he shot and stabbed her husband Travis Rohrer when he returned home. Travis survived. Singley also murdered his cousin's neighbor, Jim Gillian, who confronted him after the incident. Richard Scott Baumhammers, 22 years on death row. On April 28, 2000, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, immigration attorney and spree killer Baumhammers started a series of racially motivated murders that left 5 people dead and 1 disabled. He went to the 63-year-old Jewish neighbor who lived next door, Nikki Gordon, at 1:30 p.m. and shot her dead before setting her house on fire. For 31 years, Gordon had been friends with Baumhammer's parents. Then he got into his black Jeep Cherokee and headed to the synagogue where Gordon belonged in Scott Township. After shooting at the synagogue's windows, he got out of his car and spray-painted 2 red swastikas on the structure. Anil Thakur, 31 years old, a native of Bihar, India, was shot and killed during his lunch break at the India Grocer at Scott Town Center, just a short distance from the synagogue. Sandeep Patel, a 25-year-old store manager, was shot in the neck and became paralyzed. Patel would spend the next 7 years confined to a wheelchair before passing away in February 2007 at the age of 32. This happened following complications brought on by pneumonia. Baumhammers drove to Carnegie's Ahabat Akim congregation and shot to smash the synagogue's glass windows. He went inside Yafei Chinese cuisine at Robinson Town Center, which is roughly 10 miles from his house. There, 2 Asian Americans, the 34-year-old manager of the Chinese restaurant and the 27-year-old Vietnamese American cook, were shot and killed in front of customers. Baumhammers drove from Robinson Town Center to C.S. Kim School of Karate in Center Township, Beaver County, where a 22-year-old African-American man named Gary Lee was practicing karate with a friend who was European-American named George Thomas. After aiming the gun at Thomas for a moment, Baumhammers turned and shot Lee, instantly killing him. In the Pennsylvanian town of Ambridge, Richard Baumhammers was detained at 3:30 p.m. after being pulled over in his Jeep. His 2-hour rampage covered a distance of 15 miles, crossing 3 townships. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.